So I wish just to confirm that I am overdressed, but when I walked my Labrador at 6 o'clock on Wednesday morning, it was snowing. So I felt I should at least cover my bases and look formal for my participation. What may interest you to know is it will be just this hot and just this humid in Canada in 6 months. But right now we're in for several months of snow. I'm very pleased to have accepted the invitation of SINTER Cafe and Arnaldo Oliva, who was a strong lobbyist, as well as Francisco and Grace Mena, for participating in this conference. I have been to SINTER Cafe once before and made, I guess, a somewhat dubious offering that in another era of low prices, I hate to say, that specialty would take care of itself. And producers need to stop worrying about specialty. It will get its premiums. It will take care of itself. And they needed to focus on the next tier down, the good, the very good coffee. And that's where their focus, I think, needed to be. And I think that's been proven out, that specialty is taking care of itself. So, I'm going to give you a very quick overview of the Canadian coffee market, sort of the 50,000 foot level, I'll call it. Canada's position in the world of coffee, our imports, a sector by sector overview in terms of volume and dollars. Issues that are on the radar, they're probably shared very much by other coffee organizations, and what the future outlook is like. So, who we are is a national trade association for the coffee industry in Canada. We have pretty limited grower federation membership. We have a very substantial base of importers, both those based in Canada and in the US. And we have roasters of all sizes, from the small specialty to the usual suspects at the multinational level. We have retailers, some of whom will be well known to you, such as Starbucks. Some of you may be less known to you till the end of this talk, such as Tim Hortons, which is a little bit of a national icon for coffee in Canada. We work well with the NCA, the SCAA. We work with the SCAE and the ICO. I'm a member of the private sector board of the ICO, and some of this presentation is what I prepared for that. So exactly where does Canada fit in the world of coffee? I'd like to say, as the second largest physical country in the world, we were the second largest coffee consumer, but that would be ambitious. But when you look at the volume in traditional importing markets, you can see the United States still leads, Germany, Italy, Japan, France, Belgium, United Kingdom, Canada, and the Netherlands. So we are in sort of the top 10 of traditional importing markets. Meaning, countries that are, I think, have a long established history of importing coffee, consuming coffee. But of course, being from a small country, I suspect people in Costa Rica may feel the same way if you're making comparisons to Brazil or Argentina. We can play around with statistics. So in terms of volume, total disappearance, the EU is obviously dramatically the leader at 72 million bags. The US at 26 million. Brazil now, with its incredibly strong internal consumption market, 20,300. Japan, and now we're up to 5th. This is something we're willing to accept in anything except ice hockey. But we're 5th as a total market. I think I have determined that we will be surpassed by both Indonesia for its strong internal consumption market, and by the Russian Federation. Although substantially a soluble market, they will probably use more pounds in 2014 than Canada. So, that emergence, they will exceed us. If you take the growth rates that were talked about at the ICO meeting in the 50th anniversary ICO meeting in Brazil, the growth rates for India and China on their population base, I think, hold enormous promise for the growing demand of world for coffee. And I think that's the way out of what we are now into another era of relatively low prices. Will this stimulate green prices? That's not my role to discuss. But given the enormous population basis, the double-digit growth rate in China and India is very promising for eating up the incredible production that Brazil, Indonesia, and Vietnam have been able to generate. So this is sort of a Hebrew version that reads left to right of our import history. And you'll see from 2003 to 2012, it's actually a fairly strong tradition of import growth. And in fact, when you look at, these are ICO slides of the growth rate from 2000 to 2010 in other markets. The US 1.5, most of the European markets are pretty flat. The UK stands out a bit because of their adoption of more roast and ground coffee. But these are actually fairly flat numbers for that 10-year period. But during that 10-year period, 2000 to 2010, the Canadian market was actually significantly stronger. We grew at nearly 7% year over year during that period. And frankly, I think that makes us about the strongest traditional importing market in the world. And it's hard to stress to identify exactly what happened, but we've had significant population growth in terms of immigration. We've had a sustained, and I emphasize, good quality market. So our grocery store product, the private label product in a grocery store, is good coffee. It's not specialty. It's good or it's very good. And yes, we have all of the typical players, Starbucks, Second Cup, Timothy's in our own country, and increasingly independent cafes. But I think the focus has been that the good quality coffee, so FAQ, good quality coffee, not specialty grade coffee, has been the secret of that growth. The other is we've made it very available. But the points of distribution in Canada are remarkable by contrast to almost any other country in the world. If I identify our largest mainstream player in Canada has about 3,500 stores within the Canadian market. By normal comparisons to the US and Canada, that would require the Dunkin' Donuts of the world to have somewhere between 30 and 35,000 outlets to be matched. So we are very overrepresented in terms of away from home consumption possibilities. So where do we get our green coffee from? And I'm disappointed to be in your lovely country and say you just missed out on the top 10. This is green coffee, and I stress that only because we have no ability to track coffee that is roasted elsewhere and its origin transfers. So we can't track that, but we're very strong in terms of Colombian and other miles. You can see it's, I think, a fairly good quality coffee market in that terms. Obviously, with value-added coffee, the U.S. is we have the largest trade relationship in the world is across the U.S. and Canadian border, and it certainly includes coffee in that. Then Italy, Germany, Switzerland, Colombia, which I think is largely, to date, soluble coffee. So where does this leave us overall in terms of per capita consumption? And as you can see from this chart, we're obviously, and I missed the remarks of my Swedish counterpart about the incredible markets that exist in Scandinavia. You can see Finland, Denmark, Norway, all just dramatically leading per capita consumption. And what is interesting is in the early 1960s, the amount of coffee consumed in the Netherlands and in Scandinavia was very similar per capita basis to what was consumed in the US and Canada. The US and Canada declined. The Scandinavian countries took off. So there is a sense that coffee consumption can be altered by perceptions of health, perceptions of convenience, perceptions of quality. It can change. So we find ourselves, above the U.S. in terms of per capita consumption. We fit in sort of the Southern European model, Spain, Portugal, in terms of per capita consumption. Oh, I've got some Canada-U.S. comparisons. We live next to the elephant. There's no doubt about it. So we inevitably are driven by our members to try to make comparisons to the U.S. market. And as you can see, all coffee beverages were now very similar. This is percentage of people drinking coffee on a daily basis, 65 in Canada, 63 in the United States, very similar. The American approach to collecting this data has changed in that they have captured their Hispanic and African American population more accurately with new studies. This has grown dramatically over the last several years. So we're very similar markets in that sense. But it's one of the big differences is they're much bigger consumers of soft drinks. Source of caffeine, source of energy. Canadians are just not as driven to soft drinks. You would seldom see a soft drink being offered at a Canadian meeting in the morning. Would be coffee and tea. And the other is I've done the wrong thing here. Sorry. The other is the difference between all tea beverages, which you'll notice is virtually the same. 37% in Canada, 44% in the United States. But hot tea has by virtue of tradition, a much greater role in Canada than it does in the US. So a lot of tea consumption in the United States is based on iced. And bottled water, similar numbers. We see that actually as a slowly declining market based on environmental concerns, based on cost issues. So this is consumed past day and past week. And it's again very similar. 65% in Canada drink daily, 63% in the US. 78% of Canadians consumed in the past week. 75% of Americans consume. So very similar markets. But the cups is a bit misleading because Canada has a higher per capita consumption of coffee, but Americans consume much larger cups of coffee. And Canadians also consume generally a stronger brew, so the throw weight to coffee is significantly higher in the Canadian market on average. And these are the types of coffee: total coffee, traditional hot coffee, specialty coffee beverages. Again, a parallel. Dramatic growth over the last 10 years in the specialty beverage industry, which has changed the landscape for people. I now, when I'm phoned by an individual cafe operator who says, should I bother to spend $3,000 on an iced coffee machine because it seems very expensive, I'll go, you don't want into the business if you're not participating in that, because it has now become an expectation. Part of going into a coffee shop in Anglo North America is to be able to get an iced coffee. Age, we have very similar issues. We both suffer from the fact that younger consumers do not participate as heavily in the market as older consumers. We now use a research firm that has been used by the NCA in the past, has done a protracted analysis of historical data, and it does look like as people grow older, join the workforce, their coffee consumption goes up. And I think that's a key variable in terms of whether these much talked about alternative sources of caffeine, energy drinks, and the like will really erode the issue for coffee. I think jury is out, but I think not. This is cafe tea penetration by age, and you'll see very similar, but again, the difference is hot versus cold. Canadians, by their British tradition, the French, by their tradition, are hot tea drinkers more than iced tea drinkers. This is specialty, past week's specialty coffee beverage penetration. So you'll see they're very similar. Lattes are reported, dramatic growth reported by virtually the same percentage of the population of both countries. Iced coffee is significantly higher in Canada, which is odd because we're a colder climate, but the operators in the market have really done a masterful job of making the product available and that it tastes good. So espresso, cafe mocha, all quite similar. And now we come to one of the big departures, and this is, well, I will go back and say this is the MP3 player. This is the cell phone. This is a game changer in the marketplace for coffee, and it's certainly being proven out in Western Europe and in Canada. So 20% of Canadians now indicate that they own a single cup brewing technology. And to clarify, that's one of these little capsule systems, Keurig, Nespresso, Tassimo, and many other iterations. So dramatic change, and it's a huge game changer from the vantage point of all. Oh, we'll go back. It's a game changer for everybody in the industry. Roasters love this product. It can be proprietary till patents expire. It's highly profitable. Some have walked away from their roast and ground business to pursue the single cup business. It is very appealing for grocers because they have much higher margins than they typically get for selling coffee. And oddly enough, the freight is paid by the consumer. The consumer is paying a very high fee for this coffee, and they are getting convenience and some lift in quality out of that. But if you picture, at an SCAA meeting, I once commented that these people considered they were specialty coffee consumers. And somebody said, well, that's ridiculous. And I said, well, try to tell somebody who's brewing better coffee than they did 2 years ago, is brewing it with hotter water, is paying $50 to $60 a pound for the coffee, that they're not a specialty coffee consumer. I suspect that will be a losing argument. They consider themselves to be specialty coffee consumers. And I don't think it's all, I'm not going to Starbucks, I'm not going out to a cafe. It's much more than that. It is a passionate, conviction houses report typically having 2 to 3 brands of coffee in their house based on family preferences. So this is a game changer. And I'm not sure if I were a producer, I wouldn't be concerned because less coffee is used. The biggest consumer, the sink, waste, has disappeared. So this is Canadian sector by sort of looking at it in pounds. See, about 50% is consumed at home, 36% away from home in what I will call mainstream coffee outlets, and 6.3% from specialty coffee cafes. And then you get office coffee and a little bit of other things like hockey rinks and the like. So what does that translate to in dollars? Fairly dramatic shift based on what's paid switches to the future consumption or grocery market is only about $1,250,000,000. The food service mainstream market, and that now includes McDonald's, who has chosen Canada as a target market to roll out their McCafe program and have done so ambitiously. I believe it is now in all of their stores in Canada. So in 2 years, we've jumped from 8,000 coffee-focused outlets to 10,000. So you can see the points of distribution have just increased dramatically. $900,000 in food service specialty. So what are the key attributes of the Canadian market? As I stress, it is not a specialty market. It is a good, very good quality market. We have a specialty category. Very high percentage of Colombian and other miles. 55% from Colombia and other Central American countries. 85% from Latin America as a whole. So quite dramatic. It's been a bit of an innovative market. We have become the largest source of value-added coffee going to the United States because of packaging innovations, packaging successes, and that's led to that role of having a high presence there. And we also have a very significant food service market. It is huge. And I will only say it's that actually here's the classic. This is menu importance of coffee in different countries. Italy is, not surprisingly, the world leader in terms of away from home menu importance of coffee. And Canada is number 2. So it's a huge role in the coffee consumption market in terms of away from home consumption. And we've made it accessible. It's now in bookstores, it's in hard goods stores, it's everywhere. Nespresso bars are opening in department stores. Drive-through is, not because of the climate, drive-through is a huge innovation that in Canada has, distorted. We have, I think, the highest percentage of drive-through coffee consumption in the world. And this line, I can only assure you, my camera was inadequate. It stretches about 30 cars down the street the other way. So it's very dramatic in terms of the convenience, how convenient we have made it for people to get the soft drink. People always said, I need to have a Coke, a Pepsi, or whatever, at your arm's length away. And to some extent, the coffee industry has now started to do that in Canada. So this single cup innovation, it's looked sort of innocuous. 5 years ago, we were looking at it, and I've been in the industry for over 30 years, and I thought, well, this could really revolutionize the office coffee market. If they get the platform right, they get the quality right, this could dramatically change the office coffee market. But in fact, it's the in-home use of these machines that has changed the game. And there was literally no shelf presence of this product 5 years ago. It's now 40% of the dollars in grocery and 16% of the volume in terms of coffee. So just a complete game changer, a category disruptor. And I think one that if producers thought, good, is the espresso business going to change our volume we ship to countries if they use less coffee to make espresso-based beverages? This is a dramatic one because by the term, the use of smaller weights, in some systems a little pressure, they are getting, and virtually no wastage. They're getting dramatically different results. So for the roasters, they love it. It's a totally unique opportunity for them in terms of margins. From the consumer standpoint, the environmental issues of waste, the enormous cost premium seem to be irrelevant. And they are pursuing these dramatically. I give you the caution, as I've said, from the producer standpoint, I would be more cautious about this, especially if it rolls out and continues to grow. So do we have issues on our horizon? I think the issues on the horizon from producing countries are obviously low prices. Our regulators are a little more worried about the byproducts of the high heat roasting process. You've probably heard about acrylamide, furan. There are a number of others still to come. So far, this has not led to any highly interventionist behavior in Europe or Canada or the US. Caffeine labeling, by and large, has focused on energy drinks and new sources. Wrigley's was going to introduce a gum that had 45 milligrams of caffeine in the stick. So that has been withdrawn. So I do not think that the regulators are focused on traditional sources of caffeine, coffee, tea, and cocoa. I think one of the reasons we're very happy with our extensive trade with Latin America is mycotoxins. OTA levels in Canada, pesticide residues virtually do not appear. So we have not the problems that other parts of the world do in terms of the remainders. So what's the future outlook? It's, I think, very positive with the stimulus of these new brewing formats. There's continued food service growth. Even our industry leader is still planning several hundred new openings in the Canadian market. There are about 4,000 mainstream units, of which 3,700 are in change. There are about 4,000 cafes, of which half are chains and half are independents. And now you've got another roughly 2,000 McDonald's thrown in, where it is a smaller part of their revenue, but it's a significant part of their marketing program. And so very competitive market. We have emerging competition with our sister beverage tea, but most of my members in the coffee market sell both tea and coffee. It's the tea players who are a little more reticent to sell coffee just because of aroma and other issues. So one of our key attributes is anyone in the coffee industry is now the last 20 years, when I got into the coffee industry in the late 70s, coffee had a very negative health image. There were emerging issues, dramatic potential problems. I'm happy to report the last 20 years have been incredibly good. And you think about the coffee and health news that has emerged. We see this as a dramatic way of relieving consumer concerns about coffee and health impacts. And in fact, we're working with people like the Canadian Liver Foundation and the Alzheimer's Society for joint messaging about the positive impacts of coffee and health. So I'll be around. I will leave my contact information with SINTER Cafe. We certainly appreciate our Costa Rican imports, and thank you very much for our chance to participate.